You don't raise your voice. You don't threaten. You don't explode. You pause. You withdraw. You go quiet. And somehow the room changes. You learned the power of silence early, the way it unsettles, redirects, punishes without fingerprints. You learned that saying less can make others say more, that withholding reaction can become a lever, that neutrality, when timed precisely, can feel like authority. This isn't loud manipulation. It's not obvious. It's not cruel in the way movies depict cruelty. It's controlled. It's clean. It's plausible. And if we're honest, this strategy once saved you. Silence protected you from escalating conflict, from being shamed, from being blamed for your feelings. You learned that when you don't reveal your inner weather, you can't be used against yourself. You learned to manage outcomes without ever naming your needs. But here is the uncomfortable truth you may already feel in your body. The thing that once kept you safe is now hollowing your relationships from the inside. Because silence used for protection becomes silence used for power. And silence used for power always has a cost. You may notice it when conversations end unresolved, but you won. When people adjust themselves around you, but don't feel close. When you feel in control, but also strangely unseen. This is the paradox. You maintain influence by disappearing emotionally, and in doing so, you slowly disappear to yourself. This video is not about blaming you. It's about naming the wound beneath the tactic, because silent manipulation isn't born from malice, it's born from learned invisibility.
Silent manipulation is not a personality type. It is a relational adaptation, a way the nervous system learned to shape outcomes without exposure. To understand it, we need to look beneath behavior and into structure. 1. Avoidant attachment. Avoidant attachment forms when emotional expression leads to rejection, overwhelm, or ridicule. The child learns a simple rule: need equals danger. So closeness becomes conditional, expression becomes strategic, silence becomes safety. As adults, avoidantly attached individuals often regulate proximity by withdrawing, creating emotional distance that forces others to move, adjust, or chase. Influence without intimacy. 2. Hypervigilance. This strategy is powered by hypervigilance, the constant scanning of relational threat. Tone shifts, microexpressions, timing. Silence here is not absence, it's surveillance. The brain's threat circuits, especially the amygdala, remain active while the prefrontal cortex calculates outcomes. Silence becomes a pause button that keeps you ahead of the emotional curve. 3. Emotional inhibition and impression management. Psychologically, this intersects with emotional inhibition, the suppression of affect to maintain control, and impression management, the shaping of self-presentation to preserve power or dignity. Think of it like this. Your inner world is a locked room. You decide when the door opens, if ever, and others learn quickly that access requires compliance. Neurologically, this pattern reinforces itself. Silence avoids vulnerability. Avoidance reduces immediate threat. Control feels stabilizing. Isolation increases. Pressure builds internally. Over time, the nervous system confuses control with safety, and safety becomes conditional on emotional disappearance. And if we're honest, this strategy once saved you. Silence protected you from escalating conflict, from being shamed, from being blamed for your feelings. You learned that when you don't reveal your inner weather, you can't be used against yourself. You learn to manage outcomes without ever naming your needs. But this is the uncomfortable truth you may already feel in your body. The thing that once kept you safe is now hollowing your relationships from the inside. Because silence used for protection becomes silence used for power, and silence used for power always has a cost. You may notice it when conversations end unresolved, but you won. When people adjust themselves around you, but don't feel close. When you feel in control, but also strangely unseen. This is the paradox. You maintain influence by disappearing emotionally, and in doing so, you slowly disappear to yourself. This video is not about blaming you, it's about naming the wound beneath the tactic. Because silent manipulation isn't born from malice, it's born from learned invisibility.
Here is what rarely gets named. Silent manipulation works until it doesn't. It preserves power but erodes trust. It prevents rejection but blocks intimacy. It keeps you composed but emotionally alone. The cost is an invisible grief. You are rarely misunderstood, but often unfelt. Rarely abandoned, but rarely chosen for who you truly are. You are accommodated, but not met. Carl Jung warned, what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. When silence becomes your primary tool, it begins to speak for you. It becomes your message, and the message others receive is distance. The philosophical weight here is ancient. Stoic philosophers spoke of restraint, but not concealment. They warned against becoming untouchable, because untouchability is not freedom, it is exile. At the core of silent manipulation is a fear that feels unspeakable. If I show my true feelings, I will lose leverage and be hurt. So you sacrifice authenticity for control. You trade mutuality for predictability. You avoid the risk of being known. Even simple moments become complex. You calculate timing. You ration response. You edit truth. And over time, the self becomes something you manage rather than inhabit.
Silent manipulation does not look dramatic. It looks reasonable. You might recognize it here. In romantic relationships, you withdraw instead of addressing conflict. Your silence creates anxiety, shifting power without resolution. In friendships, you go emotionally neutral when hurt. Others sense distance but don't know why. The relationship slowly thins. At work, you withhold feedback, reactions, or enthusiasm. Colleagues adjust, but clarity suffers. With family, you disengage instead of confronting old wounds. Silence replaces dialogue, freezing patterns in place. Internally, you justify the behavior as maturity, independence, or calmness, while dismissing your own unmet needs. During conflict, you wait, you pause, you say nothing, and the other person fills the space, often with self-blame. These are not character flaws, they are coping strategies that once preserved dignity. Unlearning begins with witnessing, not self-attack. You start noticing when silence is chosen, when it is automatic, when it serves safety, when it serves control. You ask a new question, not am I right, but what am I protecting? This is the turning point, because when silence is no longer unconscious, it loses its grip. Healing does not require emotional exposure everywhere. Wisdom still matters. Boundaries still matter. But healing does require restoring choice. True power is not withholding. It is expressing without collapse. Practically, this often involves inner child reparenting, learning to respond to discomfort with compassion rather than disappearance, saying, "You're safe to be seen now." Shadow work, integrating the parts of you that learn to control outcomes through absence,
honoring the intelligence without letting it rule. Relational relearning, practicing direct, contained expression in safe relationships, not oversharing, but real sharing. As the philosopher Martin Buber wrote, all real living is meeting. Control avoids meeting. Wholeness invites it. The goal is not to become emotionally exposed. It is to become emotionally present. You are not broken. You adapted brilliantly. But you no longer need to disappear to stay safe. If this resonated, share it with someone who goes quiet when it hurts. Subscribe not to be fixed, but to remember yourself. Because the deepest truth is this: silence can protect you, but only presence can free you.